Good evening. We'll get started in just a few minutes. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, scholars and parents, families, guests. Um, We are so excited that you are here this evening to see our freshmen, sophomores, and junior presentations. I'm Mindy Dickerson, the Executive Director of the Bush Center, and we are super excited that you're here. On behalf of our instructors and advisors, we welcome you to our research night. Our seniors, you may be wondering, where are our seniors? They are peppered through the audience, but they presented their final research last month, and we are delighted to showcase the work of the rest of our students for you this evening. Please join me in welcoming senior scholar Michaela Villafuerte to open us in prayer.
Good evening, everyone. Please bow our heads and pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the talents and gifts that you have bestowed upon these DSP students. Thank you for the opportunity to share months' worth of research during this night. We pray for your hand to be over all of the technology and logistics of tonight and over the students themselves, that you would calm their nerves, ease their minds, and give them a boldness to speak that comes from you. Thank you for the parents, teachers, peers, and other supporters who make it possible for DSP to be the amazing program that it is. Protect everyone tonight and as they go home after this event. Father, we devote this night and all of these presentations to be an honoring time to you. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Tonight we're joined, thank you, Michaela. Tonight we're joined by our head of school, Leanne Messer. Miss Messer, where are you? Wave to us. There she is. Dr. Darren Price, our principal, there in the back, and Rochelle Moore, our Dean of Faculty. So thank you to those of you that are here with us. We are going to pass the microphone over to our Associate Director for DSP, Jenna LaFlamme, and our instructor, Dr. Kelly Oliver. Again, thank you for being here, and we're in for a wonderful treat tonight.
Good evening, everyone. All right, I have the exciting part about giving our awards this evening. So next week, on the 19th and 20th, one student from each DSP class will receive the Most Outstanding Student Award at their respective awards assemblies. However, in addition to our most outstanding students in each class, we would also like to acknowledge other scholars whose unique contributions and character have meaningfully shaped the culture and community of our program. So the first award we have this evening is called the DSP Exemplar Award, and I'm going to ask Michaela Childs to come up because she was last year's recipient, and she is going to be handing it off to this year's recipient. So the DSP Exemplar Award is awarded for the most exemplary demonstration of scholarship and leadership within the DSP. This always goes to a rising senior who fully embodies and reflects what it means to be a distinguished scholar, both in name and in action. So in every way, this student embodies what it means to be a distinguished scholar. She is diligent, thoughtful, and intellectually engaged, consistently demonstrating both academic excellence and a deep respect for the learning process. But what makes this student truly remarkable is the humility she brings alongside her achievement. Despite her consistent top performance, she never makes others feel lesser. Instead, she draws them in, inviting peers into meaningful discussion, encouraging collaboration, and making space for every voice to be heard. Her joy is steady, her presence uplifting, and her leadership quiet but unmistakably strong. Whether in the classroom or beyond it, she models the kind of well-rounded excellence this program exists to cultivate. This year's recipient of the DSP Exemplar Award is Gracie Cervantes. All right, our next set of awards are the Outstanding Leadership Awards. These are given to 2 students in every grade level. They are awarded for demonstrating the character, compassion, communication, courage, and competence of a distinguished scholar. We're going to start with our 9th grade scholars. So this student may not be the loudest voice in the room, but his presence speaks volumes. He leads through consistency, integrity, and a quiet confidence that has only grown stronger throughout the year. Among the many qualities this award honors, 2 stand out most clearly in this student: character and competence. Whether in class discussions, statistics activities, evening events, or field trips, he carries himself with humility, maturity, and a deep sense of responsibility. He can be counted on to do the right thing, especially when no one is watching, and his work consistently reflects the focus and excellence we associate with a distinguished scholar. When called upon, he communicates with insight and clarity, and we look forward to seeing him grow in boldness and step into the courageous, kind leaders that the Lord is clearly equipping him to become. This year's first 9th grade recipient of the Outstanding Leadership Award is Christopher Matthew. Congratulations, Christopher. All right, this next student may have joined us mid-year, but from the moment she stepped into the program, she carried herself like someone who had been part of it all along. With quiet confidence and a clear sense of purpose, she immediately stood out, not for demanding attention, but for the steady way she modeled the values of a distinguished scholar. She contributes consistently, raises her hand with thoughtful insight, and brings a posture of kindness, curiosity, and respect to every space she enters. Even on the softball field, her leadership is evident, not in volume, but in effort, attitude, and example. Her courage to step into something new, her compassion for those around her, and her commitment to growth have already left a mark on this program. This year's next 9th grade recipient of the Outstanding Leadership Award is Emma Estrada. All right, for 10th grade, this student leads with quiet consistency, intellectual depth, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. He approaches every assignment with care and focus, always striving to produce work that reflects his best effort. His proactive communication, respectful demeanor, and responsible follow-through set a standard that is worthy of admiration. In the classroom, he listens carefully, thinks critically, and offers insights that reflect both thoughtfulness and maturity. His clever sense of humor and talent for writing add dimension to his leadership, reminding us that strength often shows itself in subtle, steady ways. This year's first recipient of the Outstanding Leadership Award from the class of 2027 is Price Houston. This next student brings a remarkable blend of joy, curiosity, and compassion to everything she does. From the moment she joined the program, she embraced its values with eagerness and grace, connecting seamlessly with peers and teachers alike. What distinguishes her most is her proactive mindset. She doesn't wait to be asked, but consistently steps in to help classmates stay organized, refine their writing, or feel more confident in their work. Her questions reflect a deep intellectual curiosity and a sincere desire to grow, improve, and excel as a scholar, always leaning in, always eager to engage. And even in difficult moments, she brings grace, humor, and perspective. These qualities make her a natural leader and a gift to this community. This year's next recipient of the Outstanding Leadership Award from the class of 2027 is Ella Rothbauer. This next student from the 11th grade stands out as a deeply engaged and perceptive leader within the Distinguished Scholars Program. He demonstrates an uncommon ability to read a room, understand the dynamics around him, and respond with thoughtfulness and intention. Academically, he approaches complex ideas with clarity, discipline, and a genuine desire to engage with and learn from the people around him. He often initiates meaningful conversations with peers and works through challenging concepts with care and curiosity. He balances a demanding course load with impressive composure, all while maintaining a consistent and enthusiastic presence in the life of the Distinguished Scholars Program. Whether speaking with prospective families at open house events or finding helpful ways to support his teachers, he actively seeks opportunities to promote the values and vision of DSP. Insightful, articulate, and quietly influential, he models the kind of leadership that elevates this program and anyone around him. This year's first recipient of the Outstanding Leadership Award from the class of 2026 is Owen Hawthorne. This next student radiates kindness, joy, and a deep love for learning that's evident in every space she enters. Since joining DSP, she has embraced the program with remarkable tenacity and focus, consistently seeking out feedback, welcoming growth, and approaching every assignment with both energy and enthusiasm. Her leadership is marked not by formality, but by the simple, powerful way she uplifts those around her, encouraging her peers, checking in on others, and bringing a sense of lightness and hope to even the busiest days. Her courage to pursue excellence across academics, dance, music, and theater reflects a rare balance of discipline and creativity. She leads with her faith, quietly living out the words of Matthew 5:16 that say, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." She is the kind of person who glorifies the Lord not through performance, but through presence. It's clear that her heart's desire is to show others the love of Christ, and she does so simply by being true to her authentic self in every room she enters. This year's next recipient of the Outstanding Leadership Award from the class of 2026 is Mia Chang. On to our seniors. This student has embraced both academic and personal challenges with confidence, tenacity, and a strong desire to grow. Over the course of this year, he has stepped more fully into his leadership, becoming a trusted resource for peers, a thoughtful communicator across audiences, and a model of intellectual persistence. His writing reflects a deep and agile mind paired with a growing awareness of how to make complex ideas accessible to others. Outside the classroom, his ambition is just as evident. Whether taking on additional AP exams beyond the school's offering or swimming through shark-infested waters in the middle of the night, he faces every challenge with drive, focus, and remarkable discipline. His willingness to pause his own work to help others speaks to the kind of leader he is becoming, one marked by initiative, clarity, and a deep commitment to excellence. This year's first recipient from the senior class for the Outstanding Leadership Award is Nate Sun. Congratulations, Nate. This next student exemplifies the kind of leadership that is both intellectually sharp and deeply grounded in character. Her communication skills are among her greatest strengths, evident not only in the clarity of her voice, but in the depth of her questions, the strength of her arguments, and the integrity with which she engages others. Her research this year has been nothing short of outstanding, reflecting both curiosity and the discipline required to pursue meaningful answers. She has juggled her roles as a student, athlete, D group leader, and NHS member with a steady determination that doesn't seek the spotlight but always delivers. Over her 4 years in the program, she has remained true to herself, Yet she has also grown in courage, stepping more fully into her authenticity and into powerful moments of connection. On the last night of our international trip to Paris, Switzerland, and Bavaria, she shared her journal reflections with vulnerability and strength, surprising even herself, and leaving a lasting impression on myself, on Mrs. Dickerson, Dr. Price, and her peers. She is a capable, driven, and unique young woman who knows what she wants and pursues it wholeheartedly. This year's final recipient of the Outstanding Leadership Award from the graduating class of 2025 is Kirsten Reed. All right, this next award is a new award this year. It is awarded to a graduating senior whose visible passion and steadfast commitment have helped elevate and expand the impact of the Distinguished Scholars Program. As a bold ambassador and advocate, these students have consistently invited others to see the value and vision of the Distinguished Scholars Program through their time on campus. This is our new Lasting Legacy Award. So I'm going to read you the criteria, and then we will present our first two winners ever. The criteria for this award is consistently and positively represents the Distinguished Scholars Program in both formal and informal settings on campus, in class, and in the broader community. Proactively advocates for and promotes the program without being prompted, using personal voice and presence to elevate its mission and impact. This student takes initiative to champion the program's growth and visibility, whether through mentorship, event participation, or creative leadership. They exemplify responsibility, respect, and maturity in the research process, modeling academic integrity and commitment to excellence. These students communicate clearly, confidently, and respectfully with peers, teachers, and program leaders. They invite others into the DSP culture by encouraging participation, building enthusiasm, and fostering a sense of belonging for younger scholars. And lastly, these students leave a lasting, positive imprint that reflects the heart of the program and inspires future cohorts to carry the vision forward. So both of these students who are going to be receiving this award have consistently represented the program with professionalism, kindness, and a collaborative spirit, often in real time or as a spur-of-the-moment request, serving as informal ambassadors to peers, faculty, visiting administration, and the broader school community. Our first award recipient. This student has served as one of the most consistent and compelling advocates for the Distinguished Scholars Program, I would say ever. Speaking not just with clarity and enthusiasm, but with a rare authenticity and charisma that draws others in. Time and time again, he has stepped forward, even this evening, whether for scheduled tours, impromptu panels, or last-minute visits. He is always ready to communicate with purpose, value, and unique spirit of the program with insight, poise, and zero need for preparation. His ability to articulate why DSP matters, not just what it involves, has made him an irreplaceable ambassador. Even while balancing significant involvement in fine arts, he has remained steadfast in his commitment to uplifting this program and encouraging others to see its value. This year's first recipient of the Lasting Legacy Award is Bauer Birchill. All right, this next student has brought energy, enthusiasm, and intentionality to every space she's stepped into as a representative of the Distinguished Scholars Program. Whether managing DSP's social media or welcoming guests with a bright smile and a heartfelt, "Let me know if you have any questions, I'm happy to help," she has consistently showcased the joy, community, and excellence that defines this program. She is vibrant and personable, yet remarkably attuned to the needs of those around her, knowing when to lead with excitement and when to listen with care. Her ability to connect with others, speak with clarity about the day-to-day student experience, and reflect genuine admiration for her teachers has left a lasting impression on visitors, peers, and faculty alike. This year's final recipient of the Lasting Legacy Award is Kate Stahl. Of course, she was sitting in the back waiting to welcome new DSP students. All right, congratulations to all these amazing scholars. Can we give them one more round of applause? At this time, I'd like to direct your attention to the order of events for this evening. It is up on the screen. We will begin our presentations here in the chapel with our junior TED Ed student talks. After our first two presentations, the MCs will dismiss anyone who wishes to support the freshmen in the Daffin Lecture Hall. Around 7 p.m., at the conclusion of our junior TED Ed student talks, our sophomores will be available to discuss their research findings with their poster presentations in the Leadership Lab, which is also in the Bush Center. If you plan to enter the Daffin at that point to support the freshmen, please wait to do so until you hear applause from the audience, which will indicate the end of the most recent presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our senior MCs for the evening. We have two seniors who will be MCing in the Daffin. We've got Josiah Wu and Sophia Kuo. If you guys can wave if you are in here, then maybe they're over in the back. Okay. They will be leading the way over in the Daffin Lecture Hall, and then leading the charge here in the chapel for us will be Nate Sun and Bauer Birchill. So Bauer and Nate, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Ms. LaFlamme and Dr. Oliver. And on behalf of the whole DSP community, I want to thank all of you for coming out and supporting us once again. We all work really hard on these presentations. And me and Nate have had the privilege of spending the last 3 years with those juniors over there who you're about to watch knock it out of the park with these presentations. So if you all want to give them a quick round of applause to kind of get them started here. Thank you so much. And before we start with Owen Hawthorne, we have one thing. If I could ask you for another round of applause for Dr. McLean. Dr. McLean, if you want to come on up, please. So, for those who don't know, Dr. McLean joined us in DSP very, very recently. And since then, I can speak for myself and other students and say that not only has she been an incredible and unforgettable teacher, but also an amazing friend to all of us as well. So what she's done for us and the memories we've made have really meant a lot, and we're going to take that with us as we go on to college. Similarly, we want to give you something to remember us by as well. So I believe you already kind of got it, but we made a DSP poster for you. Everyone went and signed it, put their signatures, drew you pictures, wrote you notes. So anything you might need to remember us by, hang it on your wall in Austin, and every time you look at it, you'll remember us. Thank you so much, Dr. McLean. You've been a blessing. And now, leading us off, the first presenter of the night is Owen Hawthorne. He's been a personal friend of mine and personally helped me get through geometry honors. So Owen Hawthorne is a faithful, empathetic, and passionate student who would like to thank his parents for getting him to where he is today. For his mother, Lisa Hawthorne, he is thankful for her endless encouragement and support, for how she instilled a good work ethic in him and promoted the confidence he has today. For his father, Rick Hawthorne, he is thankful for his encouragement to try new things, the discipline and morals he has shared, and being an overall exemplary role model. And more importantly, an exemplary father. At Houston Christian, Owen has been involved in Staying Tech Robotics, helping the team reach regionals and serving as their vice president and worshiping and praise club, among many other activities at school. Theoretically, in his free time, he enjoys spending time with his friends, reading, playing video games, and picking apart films and shows. Finally, Owen Hawthorne is excited to share and present his research with you, and thanks you all for your attention to the DSP Junior Class of 2025 presentations. Please take it away, Owen Hawthorne.
Right now, we stand right now, we stand between the crossroads of ancient medicine and that focused on intangible ideas to cure medicine. They focused on spirituality, they focused on mindset, and they believed that's how a person could overcome disease. In modern medicine, that focused on tangible traits. It focused on what makes a person in the sense of medicine and vaccines and how that overcomes us. And it is no better said than one of the fathers of medicine, Hippocrates, who said, "It is more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has." When he said this, he was absolutely correct. However, when you think about the context which he said it in, he is completely wrong. It's not the intangible traits that we should be focusing on. It's not the mindset of the person which he believed was the correct answer, but it's the tangible traits that modern medicine tells us. It is the DNA that will let us change how medicine works, to make it more precise, and to let us win these battles within us, to let us win wars within us. And that's no better seen than CRISPR versus cancer and the war within us. Using CRISPR-mediated immunotherapy to once and for all clear cancer from our bodies. This can be seen specifically in how CRISPR is being used. CRISPR is a genetic modifying tool that goes into the human genome, finds the certain DNA that a scientist wants to edit, attaches onto that piece of DNA, cuts it out, and then, with the help of scientists, they implant the desired DNA to be able to fight back and enhance the immune system, and then their problem is theoretically solved. Hopefully. Science doesn't always go the way that scientists intend to, and there is still a lot of innovation with just this technology. Now, with CRISPR, we can address the main problems of cancer. The best way that I can describe cancer to y'all is that it's a sniper in a forest. It's camouflaged and it's deadly. The immune system can't find it and it can't deal with it, and it's rapidly hurting the host's body. He's right there if you haven't spotted him by now. And the only way that we can treat cancer as of current harms our body. Among the common types of symptoms that we see with losing hair, coughing up blood, there's a much more harmful one, and that's we can accidentally give the patient another tumor, which serves to set back progress in treating the person's cancer, considering 2 cancers is probably worse than 1. Now, we can use CRISPR to supercharge the immune system, to make our immune system more powerful, to invigorate our immune system, and to make it so it produces more help. It calls in friends. Specifically, with different scientific perspectives and finding certain genes to target, we've realized that we can make our immune system cells universal. By taking a certain receptor, we can attach it onto our immune system cells, or T cells, to make it so they can recognize all forms of cancer, and that we can take healthy patient T cells and put them into sickly patient T cells, so that way they have the strength of a healthy person fighting against this deadly illness. We can also make it so that the immune system can better target the cancer. We can get rid of the camouflage factor by making it so our actual immune cells can spot the cancer, saving the need for chemotherapy and radiation. We can also make it so T cells can better force apoptosis. We can make it so we can clear out the tumor more efficiently and safer by inducing that programmed cell death, or apoptosis, within the cancer cell. But that isn't the only way. We can invigorate it. We can have it be more expressed in the human genome, so there's more of these supercharged cells to be able to fight all the forms of cancer and actually clear all of it. We can also turn off and on these T cell expressions to encourage certain T cells when they're attacking cancer and discourage other T cells when they're harming healthy cells, because that, once again, is another problem with current treatments. We can also make it so it's more resistant to the tumor microenvironment, that the tumor can't as easily fight back against its treatment. But I'll talk more about that later in my presentation. And then thirdly, we can produce more cytokines, or these little tiny proteins that go into the tumor cell and help force apoptosis. We can create them faster, meaning there's more of them. We can deliver more of them to the tumor cell. And then we can make it so that these smaller proteins are actually able to infiltrate the tumor cells more severely and actually clear all of it as opposed to just some of it, which it would then expand back to what it was before the treatment. We can also look at the tumors, though. As tumors are a part of our DNA, we're able to use CRISPR to change how they work. We're able to make them more susceptible to our immune system, so they become an everyday virus or infection. We can reveal them. We can strip them of their camouflage, so that way the immune system in its entirety, and not just T cells, are able to focus and find the tumor and get rid of it. We can also weaken its tumor microenvironment. By removing its harmful effects, the tumor is less likely to be able to fight back and disable our immune system, which not only means that we're able to clear the immune system, but it means that we won't run into issues where our immune system drops because we have cancer, meaning we're more susceptible to other viruses. And finally, and by far the most important one, is we can slow the growth of the tumor. This not only helps us cure it and buys more time for the doctors to get rid of the entire tumor, it buys more time for the patient to spend with their loved ones. It buys more time for them to fight back. And by far the most important of the three factors is it gives them hope. It gives them hope that they'll be able to live a normal life that they normally won't be able to with this type of disease. Now, when I looked at all my research, all these different scientific perspectives, combined the similarities of the trials, and saw the different success rates in the two different types of trials, rat trials and clinical trials. In rat trials, there was a 50 to 80% efficacy rate in controlling the tumor. That is great news and a huge success. That means, at least for mice, we are at the pinnacle of being able to stop their cancers. However, when it came to clinical trials and actually testing it in the entire human environment, there was only a 10 to 50% efficacy rate in controlling the tumor, meaning there is still a lot of research needed to be done for this special type of disease. However, I would like to mention that not all hope is lost. Most of these clinical trials, and even most of the rat trials, only focused on one perspective, and of that one perspective, only focused on one gene, maybe two, meaning that they might have strengthened the T cell, but they only did it through one method, which is why in my future research, I would like to be able to combine these different perspectives, looking at both weakening the tumor and also supercharging the immune system to be able to find and gain more control over the tumors. Which is why I would like to ask y'all to help get people off Cancer Row, to support CRISPR, to support medicine, to support science, so that we can change the first words of the definition of cancer from cancer is to cancer was. Thank you for listening.
Ooh, Mike. Thank you very much, Owen, for that crisp presentation. Next, we will have Olivia Donahue, who will be presenting on the similarities and differences between art media and collective human thought across cultures. At HC, Olivia Donahue has played the harp and orchestra, is involved in HC Robotics, helps with the Grace and Truth Club, participates in NHS, works on setting up the HC Environmental Awareness Club, and of course, is a member of the DSP class of 2026. Outside of school, she likes to read, paint, cook, and garden, and she would like to thank her parents who do research on their own for always encouraging her interests both in and out of the classroom. Her research branches off from her previous research and explores the relationship between art and culture and how different forms of art seem to be more similar across some cultures than others. Olivia would like to thank her teachers for supporting her research, her fellow scholars for always being there to help each other, and everyone who came to Research Night. Take it away, Olivia.
Have you ever wondered why cultures have such similar stories of knights in shining armor and damsels in distress, but such distinct and unique visual art styles? Hi, I'm Olivia Donahue, DSP class of 2026, and today I will be talking about similarities and differences in art, media, and collective human thought across cultures. Before I started my research, I divided it into 3 different categories. The first one was folk tales, because they provide a more structured view of art. The second was visual art, because this is where I myself have seen the most difference in between cultures. And the third was poetry, because it combines the structure of folk tales while still keeping the imagery of visual art. After my research, I divided my findings into 5 different subcategories. The collective unconscious, motifs, and aesthetics all help to answer the question of why art might seem more similar, while religion and Eastern versus Western thought all help to answer why it might be more different. I'll talk about the similarities first. The collective unconscious is the idea that there's sort of a bank of knowledge that all humans have access to. And this can help explain why we see such similar stories of good overcoming evil, or the idea of a hero's journey. However, the cosmic hunt provides an interesting retaliation to this theory. The cosmic hunt relies on the inclusion of the Big Dipper constellation. However, in cultures where the Big Dipper is not as celebrated or is not even able to be seen in the sky, this myth is notably absent. This shows that while the collective unconscious can be used to explain some similarities, it cannot be used to explain all of them. Another aspect of the collective unconscious is the idea of art development. One study between Japanese school children and American school children found that they had very similar artistic progression, except for when their cultures started impacting what they were drawing and how they were drawing it. Archetypes can sort of bridge the gap between the collective unconscious and motifs. And these are kings, or the idea of like a jester or a knight. And these are seen across folk tales from different cultures. The second idea of motifs is the idea of symbolic evolution. And what this means is that while a symbol might start off meaning one thing, such as fire being used to denote destruction, it can grow into meaning something else, such as rebirth. And lastly, aesthetics was the final point I found that sort of explained why cultures have such similar art. And it's important to recognize that this doesn't mean that all cultures share the same aesthetics, but just that all cultures present some sort of importance about aesthetics. And these aesthetics can change even within a single culture. Classical art used to put more of an emphasis on formalism, or representing a subject exactly as how it is depicted in real life. But it progressed into being more about symbolism and what the subject is trying to say within the art piece. The second point is very similar to symbolic evolution, but it's more about motifs. And this means that while a motif might mean one thing in the context of poetry or folk tales, it can mean something completely different within the context of visual art. And the last way that aesthetics can change is through cultural adoption. While this process can start off as cultural appropriation, the stolen motifs or stolen aesthetics can become so involved in the culture that it sort of becomes a part of the culture's art itself. Now I'll talk about the differences. Religion was a major aspect in defining why different art comes from different cultures. But first we have to talk about the distinctions between myths and religion. Greek mythology was often thought of to be the religion of ancient Greeks. However, new research shows that it should more be considered a sort of collection of folk tales, because it doesn't follow traditional religious mythos. And secondly, it also depends on how involved the religion is in the culture. Cultures that have a very distinct religion have often very distinct religious and secular art, whereas cultures that have a more ingrained religion within their society often have more homogeneous art. And Eastern versus Western thought also had a very big role in impacting how art was depicted and viewed. However, this was on a more fundamental level. For example, Eastern art places more emphasis on the overall harmony of a piece, whereas Western art places more emphasis on formalism. You can think of this as Western art places more emphasis on math and proportions, where Eastern art places more emphasis on the cohesion of elements within a piece. The second way that Eastern versus Western thought kind of diverged was within their thoughts of folk culture. In Japanese culture, for example, there is much less of a distinction between the mainstream culture and folk culture, whereas in modern day America, there is a much larger distinction between folk culture and mainstream culture. And the last way that they disagreed was the idea of creativity itself. So Western thought often places a more active role on creativity, that the artist creates creativity within themselves and imbues that within their art, where Eastern cultures take more of a passive view of creativity, that creativity flows through an artist and into a piece. Although there are many reasons why art between different cultures might feel more similar, the inclusion of motifs, the importance of aesthetics, and their connection to the collective unconscious are all major reasons on why it might feel more similar. And likewise, religion and differences between Eastern and Western thought are all ways in which they might feel more different. This research could be furthered by asking the same questions, but in a more interconnected society such as ours today. Thank you.
So much, Liv. Fantastic job. I am now going to dismiss all the freshmen to proceed to the Daffin Lecture Hall to perform y'all's presentations. Y'all are going to do fantastic. We're going to allow them some time to leave, and in the meantime, I'm going to invite anyone else who would like to support the freshmen to also exit and go to the BCSL and support them. I watched a couple of their presentations, and my first thought was, wow, they're so much better than we were freshman year. So you are in for a treat if you go and watch them, I promise. Alrighty, looks like they're all going. So our next, our next presenter, he's another personal friend of mine, and I had the pleasure of spending ILT with him this year. His name is James Hintz, and he will be presenting on game theory, the science of decisions. James Hintz is a hard-working, creative junior. He attributes his skills and curiosity toward research to his grandfather, Tom Hicks, and thanks his mother and father, Catherine and Curtis Hintz, for always encouraging and assisting him with complex research topics. During his time at Houston Christian, James has served in robotics, Model UN, Aviation Club, and NHS, and he is an integral part of the Theater Tech Build team. Theoretically, in his spare time, James hangs out with friends, plays video games, plays basketball in his driveway, and plays with his dog Luna. Finally, James would like to thank you all for attending, and he hopes you enjoy the DSP class of 2026 final research presentations. Take it away, James Hintz.
Hello, my name is James Hintz, DSP Scholar Class of 2026, and today I want to tell you a little bit about game theory. Now, game theory as defined by Britannica in 2021 is this mess, this branch of applied mathematics devised to analyze certain situations in which there's interplay between parties that may have similar, opposed, or mixed views. It's way too broad, there's nothing getting done here, so let's just get rid of it. I want to tell you a little bit more about maybe a specific part of game theory, that being the Nash equilibrium. Now, something synonymous with the Nash equilibrium is the prisoner's dilemma. Say Tom and Jerry go to Chick-fil-A, they steal a Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich, and they're both thrown into holding cells. They're given two options. They can either talk, rat on the other person, or they can stay silent. If both stay silent, they both go to jail for a year. If both talk and rat on each other, they both go to jail for a decade. If, say, Jerry talks and Tom doesn't talk, Jerry goes away scot-free and Tom goes to jail for half a decade. Now you would think, hey, they'll just, agree, they'll both, shut up and not do anything, but actually this is not what happens. In most instances in real life, they both rat on each other and both go to jail for a decade. So with this in mind, I was like, where else could the Nash equilibrium be applied, because it seemed so useful here. It was like, this is not really applicable to us, but it's got to be useful somewhere else. And a place where I saw it was useful was such as business, such as Nintendo. So Nintendo, when they were first coming up as a company, they had two options. They could either take a major stake in the industry and kind of bottleneck it, or they could feed into developers and grow the industry itself, so that way they could have a larger industry to take a part of. They chose the second option, and it paid dividends down the road for them, as they're a major, major company in today's world. Another maybe more explosive example here is the Cold War, or as I like to call it, to nuke or not to nuke. Now, given this phrasing, it's kind of obvious. You can either nuke the other person and they will blow you up accordingly, or you can both just sit there and not do anything. Now, in the actual Cold War, they both didn't do anything, because we're all here listening to this presentation. But I was like, this is the past. There's got to be something maybe more applicable to us as a culture, as a people, maybe even to me in today's modern world. And the place where I found this was in natural disasters, specifically the 2021 freeze that we had. Now, what really interested me here was, say, the Nash equilibrium of ERCOT, or what they were able to do. They had maybe two options here. They could regulate, and they could winterize, or they could do neither. They did neither. It would have cost them $5 billion to winterize. It cost $195 to $300 billion in damages when the freeze hit. One of the costliest natural disasters in the history of the United States, all for profit. Now, I was like, this can't be the only time that government messes up and, doesn't manage time, money, assets, and resources effectively. And I was wrong as I looked into Hurricane Katrina and the levee system, and how engineers literally went bad levee, good levee, bad levee, good levee, all the way down, and expected it not to fail. It would have cost them $765 million to build a proper levee system. Hurricane Katrina ravaged New Orleans in that section, and ended up displacing hundreds of thousands of individuals, and it ended up costing a total of $202 billion in damages. Now, overall, with this, I was like, the Nash equilibrium takes the facts of the situation. It takes what you can do, and it shows you what will happen. And this is where I'd like to go with my future research, because game theory, the Nash equilibrium, shows us and tells us the unbiased truth, the facts of the situation. Think back to the prisoner's dilemma. Tom and Jerry, it doesn't tell us if Tom and Jerry are mortal enemies or friends, or whether they're trying to make a quick buck. It just tells us if they talk, this happens. If they don't, this happens. And so my idea would be that, given future research, I would like to take Nash equilibrium and even more advanced game theory topics, and maybe use something such as AI and implement it to provide an unbiased opinion to government and officials or NGOs in crisis scenarios, so they can provide the best care to the most amount of people. Now, I'd like to thank you for listening to my presentation, and that's just a theory, a game theory. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you very much, James, for that presentation that took us to Nashville Hot Chicken and back. Next, we have Ellen Moore, who will be presenting on reforming adoption, how international and U.S. policies have adapted to past failures and modern realities. Ellen Moore is a junior here at Houston Christian and has loved being a part of the Distinguished Scholars Program. She's a committed student leader, serving as an NHS officer, the Girls Book Club president, a Camp Mustang counselor, and a National Charity League officer. She has played volleyball for HC since her freshman year, and outside of school, she loves to read and spend time with her friends and family. Her inspiration for her adoption research came through a personal experience. Ellen's family adopted her youngest brother from China when she was 7 years old. Ellen would like to thank her parents, Cody and Karen Moore, for their consistent support, God for his many blessings in life, and the amazing DSP instructors for their assistance throughout her research. She hopes you enjoy her presentation.
Good evening, and as Nate said, my name is Ellen Moore. I'm in the Scholar class of 2026, and my research was over reforming adoption and how international and US policies have adapted to past failures in modern realities. So my presentation is gonna start off with an interactive part, where I'm gonna put this image on the screen, and I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand if you've ever heard or seen of these organizations. So the first one is this image. So have any of y'all seen this one? Okay, a few of y'all. Well, this is the Hague Conventions on International Adoption, and I will define what all of these mean in the next slide. Have any of y'all seen this? Okay, more of y'all, perfect. Well, this is the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund. And this last image is fairly underground, and I don't really know if any of y'all have seen it before, but have any of y'all seen this? Okay, none of us, great. Well, obviously all of us know what the United States of America is because we're in it right now, but what does it have to do with the Hague Conventions on International Adoption, or UNICEF? Well, they can all agree that adoption is a lifeline, and how governments and people go about this can shape a child's life forever. Now, as promised, I'm going to define what all of these organizations do and how they're involved in adoption. Well, the Hague Convention on International Adoption is primarily focused on international adoption, and it focuses on reforming government policies and regulations in order to protect children. Well, UNICEF is different because it doesn't focus primarily on adoption, but it also creates its own opportunities to help protect children. And finally, the United States adoption system, it focuses on international and national adoption from a US citizen, and it focuses on, similarly to the Hague Convention, on policies and government regulation to protect children. Well, because they have that similarity on focusing on government regulations, I'd like to compare the two and their foundations within adoption. So the Hague Convention on International Adoption, their top priority is to preserve the rights, identity, and information of every child that goes through them. So their natural rights, the cultural identity that they have established in their home country, and their information. So whether or not they're adopted in the first place, where they're from, and maybe even who their parents are in the future. But they also address the risks of adoption, such as human trafficking and illegal adoptions. So illegal adoptions could be adopting a child through illegal documents, which could end up in human trafficking. But this risk calls for a necessity for thorough adoptions. So thorough home interviews of prospective parents, interviews in general, background checks, all to ensure that the child is kept safe through this adoption. Now, the United States adoption system has seen a recent decline in international adoptions, as you can see in the graph in the bottom right corner of the screen. And this is due to a number of reasons, such as countries closing their doors to adoption, such as Russia and China, or the recent COVID-19 pandemic, where countries didn't just shut down their adoption systems, but they shut down their countries in the first place. Now, the Child Citizenship Act of 2000 and the Equal Citizen Children Act of 2023 are two policies that I would like to focus on tonight. Now, the first one granted immediate citizenship to children who are adopted through the United States and through the Hague Convention, but they didn't acquire or allocate for children who were adopted while they were still a child and then had turned into a legal adult by the time this act came out. And this is what the Equal Citizenship for Children Act did in 2023, was covered that gap of children who weren't granted immediate citizenship because they were already legal adults. Now, similarly to the Hague Convention on International Adoption, they focus on consent, eligibility, and child welfare. And so the consent of biological parents, the eligibility of prospective parents, and just to make sure that the child's welfare is kept of the utmost importance. Now, another thing about the United States adoption system is the USCIS, which is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. Now, any adoption will go through these services to make sure that the child is granted citizenship and is allowed into the nation. Now, it is also important to look into modern events and how they shape these conventions and how they shape the adoption system for the world. So the Hague Convention on International Adoptions addresses the 2004 Southeast Asia tsunami. So thousands of children were left without homes and without families after this disaster. And so waves of American families rushed to Southeast Asia to adopt these children and to help rescue them. But it turns out that these children were only temporarily misplaced, meaning they had families living or they had relatives they could move in with. So the Hague Convention stressed the importance of a consistent international policy system so that disasters like these and legal issues do not happen in the future. Well, as I mentioned earlier, UNICEF does not only focus on adoption, but they do create their own opportunities to help children. So they warned Iraq about their poor education system because there's a high number of dropouts of school in elementary school alone. So they warned that this is their future generation and they need to prioritize their education. But imagine a child with a family and with a support system going through a bad education system. Well, now imagine a child with no family and no support system going through that same system. It could ruin their future. And they also aid children in the Israel and Gaza conflict, sending trucks of food, supplies, and clothing to these children stuck in war-torn areas. And this also just emphasizes that UNICEF is going to protect children regardless of politics. And you might be wondering, why is this important? Why does this matter to me? Well, personally it matters because, as Nate said, my youngest brother is adopted from China through a legal and safe adoption. And without these conventions and policies in place, I would not have my brother today. But why does this matter to y'all? Well, this isn't me asking you to go and adopt every child you can and bring them all into your home, because that's nearly impossible. But it is just to recognize that there are 30 million children in the adoption system without families, and just to realize that we need to help. Jesus commands us to care for the children and the orphans, and so we need to follow his word and help those in need. Thank you so much, and have a great night.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Fantastic job. Our next presenter is another friend of mine. I actually took pre-cal with her this year, and she beat me at trivia for extra credit points. So you are going to see an incredibly smart individual come up and knock out their presentation, Lauren Dickerson. Lauren is presenting on Despite All Odds, Evolutionary Implications for Neurodiversity. In the past 2 years at HC, Lauren Dickerson has been a part of HC's orchestra, STEM Tech, robotics, NHS, several AP classes, and a variety of clubs. In her free time, she enjoys reading, watching TV, learning new things, playing trivia, and spending her time with her dogs and family members. She was inspired to research her topic because it ties together her experience with autism and her interest in evolution. She would like to thank her family, especially her twin sister and dogs, as well as her teachers and fellow DSP scholars for supporting her and making this year worthwhile. She hopes you enjoy these presentations tonight. So without further ado, take it away, Lauren.
Many of you, maybe in pre-K or kindergarten, have been asked to do a fun little activity with creativity. Yours may have looked like this: drawing your favorite dinosaur or coloring in a gingerbread man. Mine, however, looked like this. As you can tell, I was very interested in human anatomy, especially the digestive system. It is with this and other niche interests that I was eventually able to be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Throughout my time, knowing that I was autistic, I grew to research and want to know more about this, and eventually want to know more about neurodiversity as a whole, which led me to my research today: evolutionary implications for neurodiversity. So, first of all, we need to establish what neurodiversity is. So, neurodiversity is kind of an umbrella term covering anything such as brain differences. This could include epilepsy, autism spectrum disorder, and even Tourette's. Now, throughout my research, I've observed a few cases of discrimination throughout history. The top photo you see is disabled children on their way to a Nazi extermination camp through their Akiton T4 movement, focusing on eradicating disabled people. The bottom image is the logo of the 1920 Eugenics Society in America, which focused on eradicating the unworthy people, such as disabled people or people of color. But it's not all bad. I also found some examples of integration throughout history. The top image is the jawbone of a Neanderthal child that was suspected to live until about 6 years old with evidence that its community loved and cared for it. The bottom example is the Emperor Claudius, who is suspected to have either cerebral palsy or Tourette's, both of which are neurodevelopmental disorders. And even though he had these and they did pose a challenge for him, he was able to fulfill his role as Emperor of Rome. Now, throughout my research, I was able to find 3 key components that maybe led neurodiversity to further the human population or just stick around. The first of which is risk-taking. Individuals that are neurodiverse tend to be greater taking risks and more willing to take them. The second is creativity. A lot of neurodiverse people have been observed to be more creative than their peers. And the third is memory. A lot of people, including me, have better memory and detail orientation, especially with autism spectrum disorder, which I have. Now, with neurodiversity, a few of the main things that are discussed and researched on it are autism and ADHD, which each have their own special factors. Autism, of course, has savant abilities, which is defined as when a high support needs autistic person has low IQ and a ton of subjects, but high IQ in one, such as being able to multiply or drawing from memory. ADHD people are observed to be novelty-seeking, which may have benefited the human population because if one member is willing to take risks, then the others don't have to. Throughout my research, I came across this point that a person is disabled not by their impairment, but by the failure of their environment to accommodate their needs, which is basically saying maybe a disability isn't a natural thing, but the one that we created through our society. And throughout my research, I discovered that what we need to accommodate neurodiverse people in our current modern environment and make them feel welcome are 3 things. The first is accommodation. We need to accommodate for neurodiverse people in simple ways such as giving them more instructions to do something or more time on projects. Another is a difference view. We currently view neurodiversity in a deficit way, saying that, oh, they're not really contributing to much, or, oh, it's kind of a disease. We should shift this framework to saying that, oh, they're just different, and that can be good. The third is identification. A bunch of people who are neurodiverse are unfortunately not getting the diagnoses they need because they face social challenges, such as being women or people of color, which are not researched as much. Thank you so much for listening, and here are my references.
Awesome job, Lauren. Next, we will have Mia Chang presenting on Rasa and musical theater emotional performance. Mia Chang is an enthusiastic and creative student at Houston Christian who has truly enjoyed being a part of the Distinguished Scholars Program. She has been part of various clubs and activities on campus, including the Asian Culture Club, choir, the Silver Spurs team, worship band, NHS, HC Golf, and HC Theater Works. She's also the president of the Grace and Truth Bible Study. Any chance she gets, Mia works on her skills at the studio and takes dance or vocal classes or acting workshops. Mia is ecstatic to be part of the Invicta Arts and Training Centers company, where she gets to pursue her true passion for musical theater. She would also like to thank her family and incredible teachers for their never-ending support, particularly Julia Estrada and Caitlin Hopkins for helping her develop her research topic. She would also like to thank her artistic mentors, Berkeley and Scott Mills, for their creative guidance in her life, and God for never leading her side earnestly and leading her through high school. Take it away, Mia.
Thank you, Nate. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Before we get started, I would like to walk through 2024, specifically my 2024, musical theater style. And if you do not know what musical theater is, it is singing, dancing, and acting. So let's get started. So in the start of 2024 in January, this is how high my kicks were. Kicks are super important in musical theater dance, and they are essential in all pieces of choreography. So this is January when I had no dance experience whatsoever. I did not take any dance classes, and that was where my body could physically go. In April, this is 2 weeks after I started taking dance lessons. And in December, that is me after kicking for a whole semester because I started taking dance consistently. Next, we have January, and this is turns. Yet again, I had no dance experience, and I could barely do a single turn. In December, I could do a single, a double, and a triple. And also, in December, I could do a double within choreography. Next up, we have singing.
It's not on any chart, you must find it with your heart. Never, never let.
Something that's important to note here is in September, I was facing a lot of vocal damage. So through that, I was taking a lot of vocal therapy, and that was the progress of taking just 1 month of voice lessons and reworking my voice and healing it. Next, we have acting. If you don't know the song, because you can't hear it right now, it is from Legally Blonde the musical. And if you know Legally Blonde and you know Elle Woods, you could tell that my facial expressions do not match Elle Woods whatsoever. And next, we have in December, me doing a monologue totally in the context of the play, of the character, and of the time period. Hi everyone, my name is Mia Chang. I am from the Scholar Class of 2026, and as you can tell, I am a theater kid. That is what sparked my presentation and my research. So I spend 25 hours a week in the studio, and you might ask why. It's because as artists, we love to build our skills and to experiment. But it's more than that. It's also just getting to explore artistry. But what most people see is not the work, but they see the outcome, which is performances. But something that all these videos showed was that training matters. From before to no experience whatsoever and to not even trying to take class to taking a semester, growth can happen. So it made me come up with this question: what makes a musical theater performer become elite in their craft? The answer, 3/4 of it, is definitely training. But as we can tell, training takes time. So I started to ask more questions. What puts all the art forms together, and what element is consistent in all of these pieces of musical theater? And what I came up with is storytelling. So you could ask me, Mia, is there storytelling? And the answer is yes. People would not spend hundreds of dollars to buy tickets on Broadway to watch people just dance because art is elevated through artistry and through meaning of story. So how this is seen is through emotions. So in my research, I analyzed 3 different types of musicals that are modern and right now in the industry. So we have The Notebook the musical, The Outsiders the musical, and maybe Happy Ending. And the 2 emotions that I chose to focus my research on is sadness and joy. So this summer, I was brainstorming what kind of topic I wanted to do, and I was actually at a musical theater summer intensive, and I was talking to 2 of my mentors that I was working with in the summer, Julia Estrada and Caitlin Hopkins. Caitlin Hopkins is the founder of the Texas State Musical Theater Program, and Julia Estrada graduated from Texas State, and she was recently on Broadway in Hamilton as Peggy, and also in the ensemble. So these people clearly have a lot of experience in the industry. So as we brainstorm different ways we can implement musical theater and psychology, they both wrote something on a piece of paper that totally changed the trajectory of my research. They wrote Raza boxes. Now, you probably don't know what it is because I totally did not know what it was when I was given this, but I'm gonna break it down in really simple terms. Raza boxes is an exercise that comes from the Indian Sanskrit word raza. Raza could be best interpreted as taste, but we might not know how to interpret taste. So let's say that raza is emotions. So on this grid for raza boxes, they would have a grid right on the floor. And in an acting class setup, all these actors would write down and draw different interpretations of that emotion. Raza examples could be love, sadness, joy, and disgust. They would draw or write different personal connections to that emotion, and they would do that for every single emotion. And then they would step into the box, walk into emotion, and they have to embody it. The first round, they would do it through sound, and then breath, and then physicality. So you might ask, what does Raza Boxes allow performers to do? So it allows our performers to isolate the skill of emoting, because in the context of working, they don't always get the chance to know how it is to solely feel one type of emotion. They also get to understand the emotion, because through writing in every single box what they interpret the emotion to be, they are also personally reflecting through it. And thirdly, muscle memory, because they are physicalizing it, so that when they do it in the future, they don't have to think so much because it's inside their body. As Cole and Minnick said, be an athlete of your emotions. That's what I champion every single artist to do to elevate their performance. Thank you so much for your time. Here are my references.
Really great job, Mia. Our next presenter is another friend. I've had her in geometry and pre-cal, and she's constantly blown me away with just how incredibly smart she really is. So she's also going to blow you away with this incredibly smart presentation that she's about to give you. Her name's Becca Gerard, and she'll be presenting on Under Pressure, How Stress Shapes Our Memories. Becca has loved being a part of the Distinguished Scholars Program these past few years, and is super excited to share her research with you. She is grateful to have served as the NHS Vice President of Coordination last year, and looks forward to continuing to lead her peers as president in the upcoming year. She has also enjoyed fueling her hobbies by running with the cross-country and track team. She's able to lead them as the girls' co-captain. In her free time, Becca enjoys reading and spending time with her friends. She's grateful to her parents and sister, as well as her friends and teachers, for supporting her in this research process. And she's happy you are all here tonight. Please take it away, Becca Gerard.
Good evening, everyone. As Bauer said, my name is Becca Gerard from the Distinguished Scholar Class of 2026, and I'm super excited to be sharing my research with you all on Under Pressure, How Stress Shapes Our Memories. So to give a little backstory on my inspiration behind this research, I'm going to kick us off with a few stories. The first of these being about elementary school me. Now, this story takes place when I was in about 3rd or 4th grade, and I was so nervous because I was biking to school by myself for the first time. And I was nervous and stressed out, but I was prepared. You know, the morning of, I locked the door on my way out, I grabbed my bike lock, I filled up my water bottle, and I biked all the way to school feeling so good about myself. And then I looked over my shoulder and I realized I forgot my backpack at home. So I have to bike all the way home, get my backpack, and bike super fast all the way back to school just to get there in time. And stories like these didn't just end when I was in elementary school either. They've continued on into my life today. Like, for example, a cross-country meet sophomore year when I remembered to pack my bag, put on my watch, wear the right uniform and warm-ups, but I forgot my running shoes at home. Or like the first day of school freshman year when I was so nervous that I remembered to plug in my laptop the night before, but I forgot to put it in my backpack for school the next day. So as I was looking back on my life and thinking about, what I wanted to research this year and what I was passionate about, I realized that there are so many stories and examples in my life where I've been super stressed out and I've remembered some things but forgotten others. And it was these stories that made me want to explore and research the relationship between stress and memories. However, before we get into my actual research question regarding this relationship, we have to answer a much more basic question first, which is, how does memory actually work? And the memory process can be broken down into 3 simple steps, the first of these being encoding. So encoding is just when your brain is receiving information for the first time. So you're taking notes on a textbook passage, or you're listening to an audio lecture. It's just sort of your brain taking in visual or audio information. The second step, a little bit less tangible, is known as consolidation. And this is the time period directly after encoding, when your brain is just taking that visual and audio information and processing it into chemicals that can be stored in the hippocampus for later use. And the last step of memory, a little bit obvious, it's retrieval, and it's just when your brain is taking these chemicals and it's information that you previously encoded and consolidated and bringing it to the forefront of your mind so that you can use it, like if you're using those notes and that lecture that you listened to answer questions on a quiz or test. So now that we understand a little bit more about how memory works, and we've broken it down into 3 time periods, we can get into my actual research question, which was, how does the timing of stress influence memory retrieval? And we can see that this is a little bit altered from my original research idea, as I've added in the variable of the timing of stress. And I thought that by adding in this variable, it would be easier to categorize my studies based on studies that looked into stress inflicted during encoding versus stress inflicted during consolidation versus stress inflicted during retrieval. And I hoped that by categorizing my studies in this way, that I would be able to compare studies within these categories. So comparing studies that looked at encoding to other studies that looked at encoding and such like that. However, what I didn't account for when I categorized my studies in this way was the sheer number of variables that were still left open for studies to use that I was looking at. So, for example, basically all of my studies looked into a different type of memory, like item memory, word memory, image memory, facial memory, perspective memory, planning memory, autobiographical memory. I mean, like truly, the list just goes on and on and on. And it was not even just the type of memory that varied, but also the type of stress that I looked into that varied. Like there was chronic stress versus acute stress versus shock-induced stress versus cold pressure stress. And not even just the types of memory and the types of stress varied, but there were just a variety of other methodological things that also varied. And because there was this much difference between the studies, it was really difficult for me to draw any conclusions based on what I looked at, because I couldn't exactly compare the results of a study that looked into how chronic stress inflicted during encoding affected image memory and a study that looked into how acute stress inflicted during encoding affected working memory. And because of this, my results were pretty inconclusive, and my results were admittedly underwhelming. However, despite these unexpected and underwhelming results, there's hope. In my future research, I hope to isolate one or two of the variables that I mentioned, and by isolating these variables and looking at these studies on a smaller and more specialized scale to the field that I'm researching, I hope to be able to actually provide you guys with some concrete conclusions next year, and I hope that I can find some trends between the relationship of stress and memory, and hopefully we can use those trends to optimize that relationship and maybe use the relationship between stress and memory to our advantage in the future. I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Becca, for that memorable presentation. Next, we will have Tully Flory, who will be presenting on standardized drops, examining the causes behind fluctuations in PISA scores. Tully Flory is an enigmatic and energetic student on the HC campus and is very glad to be representing DSP with his presentation tonight. At school, he is involved in the HC Robotics, where he enjoys his role as the presentation manager. He's also a founding member of the Future Lawyers of America Club and is in the Aviation Club. Outside of school, he enjoys reading every book he can get his hands on, scrolling social media when really he should be studying and volunteering when time allows, and he is inspired to pursue this research by his interest in students' academic performance, which is in itself partially inspired by his fascination with psychology and brain development. Tully would like to thank his parents very much and his teachers for facilitating his development and assisting in his research. Take it away, Tully.
All right, thank you, Nathaniel. And as he said, my name is Tully Flory, and today I will be presenting to you on why standardized test scores internationally are dropping. Now, my story begins, as all stories do, on a dark and stormy night. Wait, no, it was a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I was doom scrolling the New York Times, and I ran across this article that basically says the pandemic is not the only reason that students are losing ground. And as you can see, based on the helpful chart they provided here, the bottom 75% of students have either plateaued or seen significant drops since 2011-2015 testing years. And I wanted to know why. This idea has always fascinated me, the idea that sometimes schools don't do enough to help the lowest performing students do well. But before I could really research this, I wanted to know, is this an international phenomenon, or is it just in the United States, as the New York Times article itself only looked at the United States statistics. So I looked at the most lauded and most recognized international standardized test, which is the Program for International Student Assessment, or the PISA test. The PISA is administered by the OECD, which is a subset of the United Nations. So this is a true international standardized test meant to test students in 3 subjects, and those are math, reading, and science. Now, if the trend the New York Times identified played out internationally, you would expect to see significant drops in the graphs of the scores from about 2011 and 2015. And yeah, you can see them there. And I wanted to know, what is the reason behind these drops that started in 2011? And why are students no longer improving in their scores, even as the ways that we test have gotten better and our education systems have generally improved? But this is the question that I had, and this is the question that I did my research on. What caused this? Now, in answering this question, I discovered that there were so many factors that I, in fact, in order for the ease of identification, had to break them down into 2 major groups. The educational factors, factors that are specifically in education and designed by the school board, and exoeducational factors, factors that come from outside of schools and are, in fact, not as related, but also have impacts on student scores. Now, these 2 subsets both contain the reasons why these drops happen, and can both be used to explain those significant declines that we can see both inside the United States and internationally. Now, the first subcategory of a subcategory, fun thing to say, of educational is the education change. Now, these are changes in education, or the way education is worked in schools, that cause scores to raise or lower. Now, the first thing you may see up there is the digitization of the classroom. And you may think cell phones. Yes and no. Cell phones are, of course, have a major impact on student scores, as the implementation of them in students' daily lives generally tends to take away time from homework and studies. However, the real problem with digitalization comes when previously paper tests are made into digital tests. When this happens, students who did not have digital access before the test itself generally tend to do worse because they are not used to a digitalized test. Another subcategory is the environmental influences. Now, these are outside influences that are directly decided, or their impact is directly decided, by the school board itself, such as the reaction to the COVID pandemic, in which school boards voluntarily closed their schools in order to address the spread. Another example is the 2018 Spanish constitutional crisis, in which, again, schools closed because they wanted their students to be protected from any outside conflict that may have been happening because of the crisis itself. A third subtopic under educational factors that cause the change is the internal factors. Now, these are factors that come directly from the schools themselves, but do not represent a change in the way something was taught. For instance, preschool and private school attendance has a very high correlation with higher scores, as if you attend preschool from an earlier age, and if you attend private school, your scores tend to be higher. Additionally, school quality has a major effect, obviously, considering that the higher quality your school is, generally the higher your scores are. Now, outside of the school, there are governmental factors. Now, one of the big ones that you may see is government spending in education. And this is a major part, but also the efficiency of how government spends money. If the government spends more money per student, that does not necessarily mean that the student will do better. However, generally, countries that are able to spend their money better and countries that spend their money better on students generally tend to have students that score higher than countries that waste money on education or have lower education budgets. Additionally, stability of governments is a major part, as authoritarian regimes and unstable governments typically negatively impact the education sphere and schools in general. Additionally, economic factors, mainly socioeconomic and GDP growth factors, also impact the way students are taught in schools. Socioeconomic factors, of course, are influenced by wealth and whether or not your parents are rich. Essentially, richer parents tend to produce kids with higher scores, considering they are able to access more resources, attend private and preschool, as I said before, and are generally expected to do better. Additionally, GDP trends, if a country has high GDP growth, that tends to mean that their schools are better because more money is invested into them, or more money is able to be invested into them. Finally, cultural factors. Now, cultural factors center around the concept of different cultures having different focuses in school. Western cultures typically tend to focus on learning as a concept rather than doing well on tests. For example, they might prioritize learning information or absorbing information over getting an A or even an A+. However, Oriental cultures tend to focus more on getting those high test scores than they do on learning. This appears in the fact that on the PISA test, the top 5 countries were all in Eastern Asia, and the top 5 countries also all had very test-centric cultures. Additionally, cultural backgrounds tend to have a very high impact, as assimilation for scores doesn't happen immediately, so immigrants from East Asian countries typically tend to score higher, and vice versa. Now, going back to the graphs that we showed at the beginning, how do all the factors that I presented to you today, how do they explain these kinds of drops in test scores? Now, the PISA exam started off with about 25 to 30 countries taking it, but it's since grown to about 110. And a lot of the drops can actually be explained in the new countries that are added, which are usually from the Middle East and North Africa, which tend to experience both poverty, regional instability, and religious instability. Now, all this instability, of course, leads to worse schools and worse education, which causes lower scores. However, scores can also be explained by a decrease in government spending on education. Over the past decade and a half, many countries have focused less on education as a percentage of their overall budget and more on defense spending or welfare systems. The United States, for instance, cut its education budget in 2015 by approximately 60%, which of course corresponds partially with those drops in scores that we saw at the very beginning from the New York Times article. Now, any future research that I hope to do would hope to address how we can kind of fix the issue of student scores dropping. Nobody wants to see scores that look like this and that see steady declines year over year until everybody's in the bottom, but not much can seem to be done about it at this current time. However, hopefully my research will be able to find solutions and figure out theoretical ways to fix the problems that plague our current students and that are causing these declines. Thank you very much, and here are my references.
Thank you so much, Choli. Our final presentation to round off the night is Gracie Cervantes. I got to know her during the innovation experience with DSP and during DSP Switzerland trip, in which I got to find out that not only is she incredibly smart, but she's an amazing problem solver. Gracie Cervantes will be presenting on Beyond the Ballot, how parasocial bonds shape political reality. Gracie Cervantes is a dedicated student athlete and leader who is currently serving as a Houston Christian varsity soccer captain, 3-year member of the lacrosse team, and active club soccer player, and also a member of the Olympic Development Soccer Program. She has led multiple leadership positions such as student council, sophomore representative, junior class vice president, public relations, officer of Interact Club, and a Camp Mustang counselor. She is also a proud member of NHS and the vice president of communications for Girls Book Club. Gracie wants to thank her parents, grandparents, and brother for always supporting, encouraging, and pushing her to be the best. She also wants to thank her DSP instructors, specifically Ms. Laflamme and Dr. McClain, for believing in her and always being there for her. Take it away and round off the night, Gracie Cervantes.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you. Have you ever defended a politician like they were your best friend, or even cried after a celebrity breakup? Well, if you have, you might be in a parasocial relationship. These bonds basically resemble close relationships with a family or friend member, but they're only one-sided, and they're actually only between you and the celebrity or politician that you're in with. Hi, my name is Gracie Cervantes, and today I'm going to be talking about Beyond the Ballot, how parasocial bonds shape political reality. So, unless you saw my presentation last year, you might be wondering, what is a parasocial relationship? Well, parasocial relationships, basically, as I said, are one-sided bonds between everyday people like you and me and celebrities, politicians, or even in some cases, fictional characters. So this would be crying when your favorite Friends actor dies, or maybe feeling like you really know Taylor Swift, even though you've only followed her on Instagram for 5 years. So what I found in previous research is that these relationships are not inherently bad. In fact, they can actually be useful for connecting, for entertaining, and for understanding, especially in times of loneliness and negligence. However, I've found in my research this year that they can have immense impacts on political reality. So for my research, I focused on parasocial relationships with three main groups of people: celebrities, politicians, and political fictional characters. So first, I'm going to talk about celebrities. So I found three major findings across my research. The first one being parasocial relationships with celebrities led to higher levels of political participation, but they rarely influence voter behavior. So basically, this just means that having parasocial relationships with celebrities would help people go out to the polls, but not necessarily affect what they put on their ballot. So going off of the second point, I found that when a person has a parasocial relationship with a celebrity and disagrees with them on a specific political issue, they not always do they change their political behavior to fit those of the celebrity, but they actually have to manage this dissonance in other ways. For example, one way could be distancing themselves from the celebrity. So for example, if I have a parasocial relationship with Taylor Swift and she doesn't agree with me on the issue of environmentalism per se, I would not necessarily change my view about environmentalism, but I would distance myself from her, not consume as much media from her or as her songs, but I would just distance myself from her instead of changing my belief on environmentalism. Secondly, what I could do is minimize the issue and its importance to me. So for example, I could say, well, environmentalism isn't really that important to me. What's more close to my identity is my parasocial relationship with Taylor Swift and my thoughts on her. So the second group of people that I researched were politicians. And the first thing that I found was that the parasocial relationships with politicians increased political interest in individuals, basically just meaning that if you had a parasocial relationship with one, then you would be more interested in politics, which is obviously what the politician does. And so I bet many of you are familiar with this man here, Ronald Reagan. Something especially interesting that I found in my research was that many of the articles on parasocial relationships with politicians either focused on Donald Trump or Ronald Reagan, and the one thing that these two had in common were that they both had television shows before their political career, General Electric Theater and The Apprentice. So basically, these parasocial relationships that they had already built by being entertainers and on reality TV shows contributed greatly to their political career and also increased their support in their elections. So once people saw Donald Trump as being a very smart businessman, things like that, they would already trust him and relate to him, therefore he would have more support for them in politics. So the third and final group that I researched was political fictional characters. So if any of you have watched Madam Secretary or The Scandal, you know exactly who I'm talking about. So these are characters, usually women, who portray politicians, strong leaders, presidents, senators, things like that. And one finding that I had was that these political female characters increased political interest and engagement. So just like celebrities and real politicians, they made women especially more interested in politics and also more engaged in their voting and things like that. And going off of that, they also contributed to higher confidence levels, especially of women, in political participation. So basically, when someone, like a woman, saw herself in these fictional characters, then she would think that she can also participate and she can do the things that they can do in actual real-life politics. So parasocial relationships, even though they are one-sided bonds, can still be very influential for politics and shaping our political reality. So we need to be aware of how these effects of these relationships can have on us and understand how they work in political figures. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience all evening. Here are my references, and have a wonderful night.
All right, everyone. With Gracie, our junior year student TED Ed Talks have come to a close. But don't leave yet, there's still more. If you want to support the freshmen, please proceed to the Daffin Lecture Hall and make sure to enter through the door closest to the Leadership Lab. But don't go ahead and enter while there's somebody's presenting, just out of consideration. Please wait till the applause, and a student should be there to tell you when to enter. If you'd want to support the sophomores, they are currently presenting their research posters in the Leadership Lab, so feel free to just walk on in and go ahead and converse with them and just ask them what they're researching and ask about their topic. With that, thank you for being such an attentive crowd and supporting my fellow scholars tonight. You are dismissed.